Have you ever felt an attraction to someone that was so intense, so immediate, that it felt, well, less like a crush and more like a spell? You know, that almost magical pull that seems to hint at destiny, at some kind of connection that goes way beyond the everyday. Well, that's exactly what we're diving into today.
You know, this is nothing new. Centuries ago, the poet Dante wrote this about the very first time he saw Beatrice. He felt seized, governed by a force he just called love. And look, this wasn't just him being a dramatic poet. He was describing something real, a profound psychic event. It's really the perfect example of what we're exploring. So what is it that separates this kind of otherworldly, almost sacred experience from a regular old crush? I mean, a crush is one thing, but this is something else entirely. It's the kind of thing that can completely reorient your world, for better or for worse. So the big question is, how do we understand it? And maybe more importantly, how do we navigate it?
All right, so here's our game plan. We're going to start by defining what this experience really is. Then we'll get into the Jungian concept of the anima. From there, we'll see how this whole thing becomes an ethical problem, and we'll lay out a map of 4 potential ways to respond. And finally, we'll look at the best path forward, what's called the path of serious play.
Okay, first things first, we need a name for this experience, something that captures just how far beyond a simple infatuation it is. And that term is the anima projection.
Right? So in Jungian psychology, it's called an anima projection. And I want you to pay close attention to that wording. It's a psychic event. What that means is, yeah, it's triggered by a real person out there, but the real drama, the main event, is happening inside your own mind, inside your psyche. The feeling is what's called numinous. It feels sacred, divine, and just incredibly significant.
And you can recognize this experience by a few key characteristics. First, there's a feeling of seizure, like Dante felt, this sense that your soul has literally been captured. Then there's this feeling of otherworldliness. The person isn't just a person anymore, they're like an angel or a goddess. This can spiral into an all-consuming obsession, but at the same time, it brings this incredible feeling of aliveness, like you were asleep before and now you're finally awake. And all of it is wrapped up in this powerful, undeniable sense of destiny.
So what is actually going on here, psychologically speaking? Well, the answer lies in Carl Jung's concept of the anima, what he called the unconscious soul.
Okay, so on a personal level, for a man, the anima represents all the parts of his psyche that he might have pushed away to fit into some masculine ideal. Qualities we often label as feminine, like deep feeling, intuition, a connection to relationships. But here's the thing. When you neglect those parts, they don't just vanish. Nope. They get projected outward onto someone else, and that creates that intense magnetic pull. It's basically your psyche demanding a relationship with its own lost half.
But it gets even deeper than that, because the anima also works on a universal or archetypal level. Here, she's the archetype of life itself, a psychopomp, which is a fancy word for a guide to the soul's depths. Her job, really, is to lure you away from your comfortable, rational world and pull you into the messy, chaotic, but deeply meaningful reality of your own inner life.
And this brings us to the absolute core idea here. That intense, overwhelming longing you feel for another person, at its root, that's your own psyche longing to be known by you. The projection isn't some mistake you need to fix, it's a message you need to decode. It's actually a massive opportunity for growth. Now, this is where things get really interesting, because a psychological event like this, well, it very quickly turns into an ethical dilemma. When something this powerful hits you, it causes this profound disorientation, and it forces you to make a really difficult choice.
When we say an ethical problem, we don't mean something is morally wrong. We mean that you're lost, you're adrift. The experience just turns your life, your priorities, your entire sense of self upside down. So the challenge isn't to cure the projection. The challenge is to figure out how to consciously respond to the disorientation it's causing. And that leads to the central question you have to ask yourself. What ought my attitude be? Notice, the question isn't, is this feeling okay? Or am I allowed to feel this? It's, okay, given this powerful, disorienting experience, what direction should I take? What kind of person am I going to be in response to this? It's all about finding your orientation. And that distinction is absolutely key. See, morality is kind of like the collective rulebook, the thou shalts and thou shalt nots of society. But ethics, in the way we're talking about it, is about your individual, inner compass. It's about finding your own meaning and consciously choosing a path when you find yourself in completely uncharted territory.
So, if you're lost, what do you need? You need a map. And drawing from the work of Niccolò Polipo, we can actually chart 4 basic responses to this ethical problem, 4 potential paths on this journey of what Jung called individuation.
This map is built around 2 paradoxical virtues. First, you need vulnerability. That's the courage to actually open yourself up to the experience and let it transform you. But you also need incorruptibility. That's the strength to not be completely consumed or destroyed by it. The classic example is Odysseus hearing the siren's song. He's vulnerable enough to listen, but he's incorruptible, tied to the mast so he isn't destroyed. You absolutely need both.
So this gives us our map with 4 possible paths. It's based on 2 things: whether your response is conscious or unconscious, and whether you're able to hold on to those 2 virtues. So let's just quickly walk through the 3 paths that, well, don't really work out.
So the unconscious paths fail because you don't even realize it's a projection. In one case, you take it literally and try to possess the other person. You lack incorruptibility. In the other case, you just run away from the whole thing in fear, lacking both virtues. Neither of those paths is going to lead to any real growth.
Now, the third flawed path is a bit trickier because it feels smart. It's the rational-depressive solution. This is where you correctly realize, this is a projection. But then you use your intellect to just dismiss it as nothing but a fantasy. You've got the incorruptibility down, but you're missing the vulnerability to actually learn anything from the experience.
All right, and that brings us to the 4th and best path, the one that holds the tension of both virtues together. This is what we're calling the path of serious play.
The brilliant Jungian analyst Marie-Louise von Franz just nailed this paradox perfectly. You have to be able to surrender to the experience to truly live. That's the vulnerability part. But if you founder in it, if it destroys you, then you've understood nothing. And that's the need for incorruptibility.
So the optimal path, the transitional-developmental one, is all about consciously engaging with the projection by taking on an attitude of serious play. It means you know it's a projection, you know it's a psychic reality, but you don't just dismiss it. You enter this kind of middle ground, this transitional space, where you hold the tension between the fantasy you feel and the reality of the situation.
And let's be crystal clear, this idea of serious play demands incredible ethical discipline. It means you must treat the other person, as an end in themselves, never, ever as just a tool for your own psychological development. You relate to them authentically as a human being, while at the same time, you use the experience to explore what this projection is trying to tell you about your own soul. Ultimately, an experience like this poses a fundamental question to you. Jung called love a force of destiny precisely because how we answer its call can shape the entire course of our lives. It's a call from the deepest parts of yourself. The map is there, but you're the one who has to walk the path. So, what answer will you give to its question?